Patricia Falacco, still Firetalking. This is her second autobiography. To my family. I was born on July 11th, 1944 in Lansing, Michigan, and grew up in Union City until my parents divorced. Then my mother, my brother Richard, and I moved to Oakland, California. Every summer, though, Richard and I went back to Michigan to live with our dad. My mother's people were Russian, and my father's people were Irish. In The Keeping Quilt and The Blessing Cup, I tell how my mother's family came to be in America. The cup was broken during an earthquake in California. The original quilt now hangs in Mazza Museum in the University of Findlay in Findlay, Ohio. My beloved sister-in-law and her quilting guild made me an exact replica that we now take to school visits, wedding khupas, and celebrate new babies to use as a tablecloth and for other special occasions. Fiona's lace tells the story of how my father's family came from Ireland. Both sets of my grandparents were amazing storytellers. With almost no urging at all, they squinted up their eyes, watched our faces, and began to tell. Many evenings were spent in front of the fireplace, popping corn, eating apple wedges, and hearing rich, incredible tales. My babushka, my Ukrainian grandmother, called this fire-talking. Whenever she finished one of her tales of magic and mystery, my brother and I would always ask, "Bubby, is that a true story?" She would look at us and reply, "Of course it's true, but it might not have happened." It was she who taught me to make beautiful decorated Pisanki eggs. Because I have such a special love for these Ukrainian eggs, I wrote a book about them called Rinka's Eggs. My summers with my dad are golden memories. He was a traveling salesman and was on the road a lot. But when Richard and I were with him, he took time off to be with us. We went fishing and took long walks in the woods and spent almost every other waking hour on horseback. He raised horses and took delight in teaching me about their secrets and noble ways. Our school year was spent in Oakland with my mom. Her house was always filled with beautiful music and lovely things to look at and touch. She saw to it that I took ballet and studied art and drama. I loved it when she framed my drawings and hung them up in the house. In both Mom's house and Dad's place there was always a rocking chair, just for me. I spent hours and hours just rocking and dreaming every day. I spent a lot of time in my imagination. It soothed the pain of not doing well in school. I had difficulty reading. Math was, and still is, almost impossible for me. I knew that inside I was very smart, but at school I felt stupid and slow. I had to work very hard to learn things. Now that I'm grown up, I realize that I process information differently than most people do. My brain scrambles images that my eyes see. Once I got the hang of it, I went on in school. I even ended up graduating from college and getting a PhD in art history. My experiences learning to read and write prompted me to write, "Thank you, Mr. Falker." I didn't start writing and illustrating children's books until I was 41 years old. Before that, I was busy being a mother and working for museums restoring ancient icons. Now I have 2 children, a son and a daughter. They're both grown now. And after living in Oakland, California for almost 41 years, I long to return to Michigan. In 1994, I bought a beautiful old mansion that was built before the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln actually walked through my house when it was a stage stop. He was running for president and had just given a speech in Jackson, Michigan. He was on his way to the rail station in Kalamazoo to return to his home in Springfield, Illinois. I have written 2 books that feature President Lincoln, Pink and Say and Just in Time, Abraham Lincoln. My great-great-grandfather fought in the Civil War and shook Mr. Lincoln's hand at Bull Run. I have lived and studied in Australia, England, France, Russia, Oakland, and Berkeley, and now I live in Union City, Michigan. My lovely home, besides being my residence, is also a rescue farm for unwanted, sick, and injured animals. I have goats, sheep, horses, dogs, and many, many cats. One of my favorite books when I was a little girl was Millions of Cats by Wanda Gag. Cats and goats are in just about all of my books. 2 books about cats are Mrs. Cat's and Tush and For the Love of Autumn. Since moving to Union City, I have devoted my life not only to animals, but also to the children of this village. I bought an old Victorian firehouse and renovated it. The firehouse is now a center for art and music and drama. We put on performances, concerts, holiday events, and programs for children. Every Christmas, Santa actually comes here and brings a reindeer or two. A few years ago, I bought an old farmhouse and turned it into one of the most popular haunted houses in 5 counties. I wrote the book, The Graves Family, to convince the people in town that they actually lived here. On Halloween night, almost 3,000 children and their families come through the Graves house. I become Mrs. Graves. My son Stephen is a tenured university professor and teaches art and history, and my daughter Tracy has a degree in psychology, personal communication, and medicine. Both of my children and other family members appear in many of my books. Before my mother's death in 1996, she was an avid collector of geodes and rocks, and probably because they remind her of the meteor that crashed in her yard when she was a little girl. I wrote Meteor, my first book, to share that incredible event with all of you. The big one that landed in my mother's yard is now the family headstone at Riverside Cemetery, less than 2 blocks from our farm. In our family, we believe that if we touch it and make wishes on it, the wishes come true. I take a piece of that meteor to school with me and invite kids to make a wish on it. As a matter of fact, our village celebrates the meteor every summer at the Meteor Festival. Teachers, librarians, and children from all over the country attend. It's a celebration of literature, art, drama, and music. We have guest authors and concerts, plays, horse-drawn buggy rides, house and studio tours, and sometimes a bonfire. During the winter, we host a holiday event. I display over 22 trees in my home and studio. We raise money for our food pantry and local charities. My concerns about the welfare of children have influenced me on many topics I write about, including bully, a recent favorite of mine. I'm so lucky, so very lucky. I love my life. Can you imagine doing what you love every day? When I'm working on a book, I work every day until it's finished. The first thing I do in the morning, though, just like I did when I was a little girl, is sit and rock. I listen to music and let my imagination soar. I take rocking so seriously, I have at least 1 or 2 rockers in every room in my house. When I rock, my thoughts boil in my head. They catch the air and fly. The images and stories come with fury and energy. I feel like Applemondo in Applemondo's Dreams. My stories just float above me. I jot down thoughts and outlines and capture ideas before they disappear. Many of the stories are rooted in my childhood memories of people and events important to me. After I have fed all my animals and finished my morning chores, my day usually begins with writing. I do not use a computer. I use an electric typewriter. I save hundreds of little notes I made while rocking and begin to type my story, as if I'm describing it to all of you, a movie that I have just seen. My manuscripts are only usually 8 pages long, but then I send them along to the editor, who's just like your teacher. She'll read the manuscript and make corrections. Marks appear all over my paper. Then I rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. Fix story parts that don't work. I condense writing that's too long. I expand ideas that need more detail. I look for better words and better ways to tell my story. My heart sings whenever I'm drawing. As far back as I can remember, I knew that drawing connected me somehow to the universe and maybe even to God. When I do illustrations for a book, I first draw everything in pencil. I do what's called a rough dummy. It looks exactly like the finished book, except it's black and white. In those drawings, I use those drawings to make the color finishes. I draw the layout in pencil, then I lay in the colors with markers, acrylic paints, and oil and pastels and inks. Sometimes I cut out photographs of real people and paste them into my artwork. I can't tell you how many times I have made my family, my friends, and even my neighbors stop what they're doing to pose for me. I don't always get my drawings right the first time. Sometimes, as with my stories, I have to do them over and over again. Some days I go to schools and give author programs. Some days I fly to other cities to talk to children, teachers, or librarians. This year I made a special trip to California to be present for the birth of my grandchild. His name is Enzo, and we already have started telling him stories. One day he'll join us in front of the fireplace to hear a glorious tale told from the heart. After the fire-talking, he'll be sure to ask, "Bubby, is that a true story?" The answer is, Of course it's true, but it might not have happened. That's the end.